Welcome to Nerdarchy. For nerds, by nerds. I'm Nerdarchy Steve, and today I am joined by Blake Croft of UniversiD&D. How are you doing today, sir?
Hello, I'm doing fantastic. Thank you so much for having me on.
Well, it only seemed fair. You guys had us on and did an interview, which was a lot of fun. We enjoyed talking with you and your brother. You guys, what you doing over there is pretty cool. I know I've said, if I said it once, I said it a million times. I love seeing the next crop of D&D YouTubers come up and add their voices to the community, and just seeing things broaden.
Yeah, well, I mean that's kind of what we're trying to do is expand the population of like what ages are represented in the YouTube community, and we thought we'd share our own game. We're a bunch of college students, so we figured we would share our game with people, and we've been getting great feedback, and people really like it. So, yeah, it's I'm glad to hear that veterans like yourself are enjoying it as well.
Veterans, just substitute veterans for old people. Nah, it's all good. Like my wife was asking, it's like, who do you have on? And and I don't. And I was like, oh, the kids that we did the interviews with a couple of weeks ago, and I don't mean that in a disparaging way, but you guys are literally the age of my son, or a little bit younger.
Right.
You guys had just started college. He's in his second year of college, so it's like I said, it's cool. I like seeing the diversity of ages and all the different people that the hobby is reaching. So, what got you into YouTube, and what made you decide to be a YouTuber?
Well, I grew up watching streams like Critical Role and Acquisitions Incorporated, and I really liked them, and I really felt like a connection watching it. I thought they were really great, and I was like, oh, these are people that play D&D and make a living out of it. That's that's fantastic. Like that's the dream, right? And so I watched that, and I was like, okay, that's great, and they're fantastic, and I love watching them, but like I this isn't really how I play necessarily. I'm a young person. I don't see really myself or my group on the screen. So what if we as young people got together and we brought our game to YouTube? And I felt like we had something special at our table. We're a bunch of, most of us are theater actors. That's kind of how we came up. And so we have a certain like connection at the table that I was like, oh wow, this is amazing. This is not just a bunch of nerdy kids. This is people that really care about it. And so I asked them one day, I was like, hey, would you guys be interested in streaming our our game? It wouldn't change anything, but stream our game on YouTube. And they were all 100% down right from the get-go. And so yeah, and then we just kind of started off of nothing. We didn't have a budget, we didn't have anything like that, but we were all super excited to do it, and felt like the YouTube community could use something like that.
You do have a Sage though, and Sage is going to school for filming.
We do have a Sage, which I think gave us a huge advantage. He had some of the equipment we need, and definitely a lot of the knowledge that I think is, if I were to start it by myself, I do not think I would possess that same knowledge. And so it is very helpful to have someone like Sage around.
Yeah, I imagine it would be. Being a person that kind of just started this bumbling through, I mean, our first videos were shot on an iPhone with an external mic. So I can definitely attest to how useful it is to have some people that know what they're doing involved, because we did not.
Yeah, well, everyone on our in our cast is super helpful. I mean, obviously Sage filming all of our videos and editing and all of that, but even the other people, we have a few theater and musical theater majors, and so like we wrote our own theme song, and one of our players sang it, and another one like rapped it, because we can do that because we have people who have that kind of talent, and so we kind of just it kind of all fell in place.
Nice. I mean, it sounds like you guys are having fun doing it as well, which is huge. Now, you're usually the GM, right?
Yes, I'm the dungeon master. I kind of started in that role, and I've played a few times. I played one campaign, but mostly I'm the dungeon master.
And you said you're a little bit newer to the hobby.
Yeah, we're all pretty new to the hobby. You know, I mean, we're young, so no matter how long we've been playing, we'll be new. But we started about we started the like official like Dungeons of the Dragons like with the actual rules about a year, maybe a year and a half ago.
Okay.
But before that, we had a few of us. Actually, it was kind of an unorthodox way to get into D&D, but a few of us would get together every week or so. It wasn't really a scheduled thing. We just kind of get together and we would say, "Hey, let's play D&D," but we had no idea of what D&D was. We had just kind of heard of it. We didn't have a rule set. We didn't have dice. We didn't have anything like that. But we would get together. It was like four of us, and we would sit around and we would just come up with these characters, basically just name them and come up with a concept. And we would kind of just play / tell a story. There were no dice rolled. There were no really mechanics involved. But I think that's part of the reason why my table now like really focuses on role play, because that's kind of all we started with. We didn't do anything except role play. We just kind of enjoyed, almost acting out these situations and cracking jokes. And then one time my friend Jacob, who's still at our table, he's on our stream, was like, "Hey, I bought a rule book and I watched some people play online, and would you guys like to learn how to actually play?" And we were like, "Well, that sounds kind of lame, but sure." And I thought the whole, making a character, filling out that whole character sheet, I thought all that was like kind of convoluted at first, but and then I played my first session and I just instantly fell in love with it. I was like, "Oh, okay, this is an actual game. This is something completely different. You don't just sit around and crack jokes." And like a week later,
we do, but with rules.
right. We crack jokes, but there's a rigid system. No, but like a week later, I DM'd my first session of my first campaign, and which is kind of weird to start as a dungeon master because like I don't know any more than the rest of these guys at the table, right? But I just kind of fell into it, and we started our first campaign and just played straight through a bunch of sessions, and we were all learning together. We were growing together, and it was sloppy at first, but it was fun. It was tons of fun. And then, a year and a half later, we're here. We'll put it on YouTube.
Nice. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, I think it's cool whenever I hear someone say that they started and they kind of started in the Dungeon Master role. They wanted to play the game and they didn't have someone to run the game for them, so they just stepped up and did it, and you did that. So, kudos to you for stepping up.
Yeah, well, I figured someone had to start it. So if I was the one that wanted to play, then why not learn, do the research?
I mean, one of the reasons why we have a channel is to kind of like demystify the role of the DM. I mean, a lot of the advice that we've done in the past is GM tips and GM advice, and people are nervous to switch to the other side of the screen at first, but it's like being a player. Only you have more pieces to move around is all, right. And there's no like special requirements. Anybody who's interested in DMing should just do it. And as you can see, Blake just started doing it, so it can definitely be done. And more than likely, most of those people that are kind of like him and hauling on whether they should GM or not have probably played the game for a while, right? So that's a huge advantage. You kind of already know what to do. It's just taking that leap. So.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think it was the best decision I ever made. I mean, it was really scary and like really strange to just kind of jump into that and like be in charge of a game. But all my friends trusted me. I trusted all of them, and we just kind of like went for it and had a great time.
Well, at the end of the day, too, like you're doing it with your friends, so hopefully they're going to be kind of supportive and understanding. And even if they're jerks the way my friends were back in the day, they mean it good naturedly. So,
yeah.
And that's a huge thing. And it's ultimately just a game, right? So worst case scenario is you mess things up and try again later. So it's not a big deal.
Exactly. Yeah, no, there were a lot of things I found myself, it was kind of weird jumping straight into a full length campaign to like start out, but I found myself, kind of retracing and be like, okay, well, that didn't work. So pretend that didn't happen and let's move forward. You don't have to, you can't take it seriously at first. Because everyone makes mistakes.
Yeah, absolutely. So how long was it from you first start gaming to you start the channel?
About I think it was 11 months after our first session that we
Okay.
started the channel, which seems seems very rookie, but we figured, it's like a lot of teenagers, get into it and I mean, you're lucky, if you get into it from 5th or 6th grade, like fantastic, more power to you. I didn't, and I feel like a lot of people didn't, and a lot of people find it in high school, and we found it like junior year, or junior year going into senior year even. And so we figured, yeah, we could like wait to do this until we've had more experience, or we could, reach the demographic we're trying to reach, which is younger people, and just do it now and say, it's okay if we make mistakes. We're not perfect, but I think, high school and college age kids need to see, what it's like to actually play at a younger table.
So we had a dungeon coach on here a while back, and he's got a YouTube channel, and he's a coach in high school for I think track and field, and like he plays. So he's got a D&D club that he plays with, like all like with his for with his athletes. So it's like, which is weird. So it's a bunch of jocks sitting around playing D&D.
That's I actually have I live with a few suite mates, and all of them are athletes. And one of them approached me a couple weeks ago and was like, "Hey, so I have really no idea what D&D is, but I watched your first video, and I would love it if you ran a session for me and some of my friends." And so I did. I ran a session, over Zoom. That was, really, really rudimentary and pretty basic, but it was like 4 or 5 jocks, football
Yeah.
players and wrestlers here at Northwestern. And I was expecting to be, I didn't really know any of them except for my suite mate who,
Yeah.
I've met very briefly. And so it was kind of weird. There was like this kind of tension that I felt going into it, but it was fantastic. They loved it. They got into it like as soon as it happened. So I think, I think it's for everyone. I think everyone can enjoy that and find their nerdy side in the game.
It absolutely is. And back when I was your age, if we would have been approached in a similar situation, you'd be on guard, be like, these guys just messing with us.
Right,
just
right.
like some kind of joke that we're going to be the butt of.
Right. No, there was definitely that question in the back of my head was like, do they really want to play, or
are they making fun of me?
Yeah.
I feel like nowadays, like it's way more, obviously it's way more acceptable. It's more out there. People have an idea what it is, whether it's right or wrong. Like if you say Dungeons and Dragons to any old muggle, like something will come to their mind, and they very rarely will they be like, "What is that?" They'll either be like,
Right.
"Is that the devil worshiping thing?" or "Oh, I've heard of that game," or Stranger Things, or Big Bang Theory, or whatever.
Right.
But it's like it's out there now.
I think that's definitely a good development that was not present, back in the in the 70s, 80s. But yeah, I think it is more out in the, in pop culture today, and it's more accepted, and people are wanting to get into it, even if they're not, gamers or nerds. Because I think everyone has that side to them. And I think now that it is more accepted, people can finally find that and not feel like they, have to give up their social life or anything like that.
So how far are you guys into your campaign?
So what we have up on YouTube is 7 episodes, 7 sessions. And we took a break because we all, went off to college and we're trying to get into the swing of things with classes and all that. All of us, well, most of us are freshmen. There's a few exceptions to that. So we're all just kind of getting used to college life. But we're returning right around Thanksgiving, and we're picking it up from session 8. So not very far at all. We're a new channel and a new series.
So is this the same campaign you were playing, or did you start a new campaign just for
Nope.
YouTube?
So I played my first campaign about a year. Yeah, it's like a year and 3 months at this point. I played my campaign as the dungeon master, and then my friend Jacob, who originally showed me the game, picked up the role of dungeon master for a brief campaign that I played in, which was great. I enjoyed being a player. It was definitely a lot different being on that side of the table. And then after that campaign ended, right around the end, we were like, oh, who wants to dungeon master for the third campaign? And I was like, well, I'll do it. I love doing it the first time. And I was like, well, why don't we do this series as well? If we're starting a new campaign anyway, this is as good a time as any. So yeah, so we started brand new with this series.
So when you did get to play, what was your character? What did you play?
I loved this character to death. It was a Tabaxi Hexblade Warlock named Schrodinger. And he was fantastic. There was definitely that comedic side to him, and it's a quirk. Oh, he's a cat. He would knock off drinks off tables and lap it off the floor. So there's that. But then there was also like a really personal and vulnerable side to him that I really loved, and it was a great. And Warlock is my favorite class. Maybe that's biased because it was the first player character I ever played. Yeah. But yeah, Shrody was fantastic.
And so, what is your DM style like?
So I really like to emphasize role playing because I have that theater background, and most of my players have that as well, and that's how we got started. So I don't know if that's a DM style or more like all my whole table style, but that's kind of the cohesive thing that we focus on. But I mean, I guess I do run a lot of social encounters and not as many combat encounters. And when there are combat encounters, they're really important to the plot. Sometimes I go whole sessions. I think there was a 2-session gap when we didn't have a combat encounter, at all. So I think I like to think of the game as like a story more so than just rolling dice and trying to, get to that end goal, whatever it is. So I really like to flesh out, descriptions and NPCs and give them fun voices and give them motivations. Yeah, I would say that's my DM style. I'm also a planner. I really like to plan ahead, and I would like to get into the more improv-y kind of making the session up off the fly, but I find myself really planning a lot because I care about it. I think one of the treats as the dungeon master is even if we're playing once a week, I have that craving to play D&D every day, and so I can sit down at my computer and start planning and feel like I'm playing, even though I'm only playing once a week. So I think that's really great as a DM.
Yeah, I mean, some people really enjoy that aspect of it, or even the world building aspect of it that you can do basically off, by yourself without the table. So do you have any advice for GMs for running social encounters?
For running social encounters, I think fleshing out, or not even fleshing out, but having a pre-made list of motivations and even voices or where they're from really helps me, even if it's not an NPC I had planned. I have a list of names, voices, where they're from, and their work and what their motivation is in that moment. And I just kind of throw, I can just mark up of those 5 categories, just pick one of each, and that's a fully fleshed out NPC. and so I have that list I can turn to, and that really fleshes it out. It's not just you turn around and say, like, what would you like to buy? You describe a, blue dragonborn shopkeeper who wears, like, monk robes, and works in this weapon shop, and you're like, oh, why are they a monk who works in a weapon shop, right? And so there's just like this interesting conflict and tension when you have these fleshed out NPCs that I think really heightens social encounters, even if it's a nothing encounter, like a shopkeeper. I give them a fun voice or a fun quirk.
Yeah, it's funny because when you mentioned the Dragonborn, it makes me think of we were having a discussion the other day about Dragonborn and how they are in the player's handbook, and how I don't think I know anyone that plays them that way. Where everyone I know plays them like, nope, they look like whatever dragon ancestry they have. Where in the player's handbook, they're just this ruddy brown color, and they all kind of look the same. I'm like, watch, might as well just get rid of that. No one uses that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Who wants to be, you play a Dragonborn because you want to play a dragon person, and you want to look like the dragon you're a dragon person of. So Rivers wants to know, do you use experience points or milestone?
Oh, well, I use milestones. That's kind of what I started doing because I thought it was easier, and I didn't really want to, keep track of all those experience points. But I think, when people use experience points, they like, oh, you get this many experience points at the end of a session. And I think that like kind of takes it away from the players, when they're like, oh, we're going to level up 2 sessions from now. Whereas like, if I don't tell them for, if it's higher level, like 8 sessions, anything, and then at the end of the 8th session, I say, you have leveled up. Like, I think that's super special for the players. So that's part of the reason I use milestone, but I also like to use the experience points on my own side to kind of give a basis of like, where the milestone should be. So it's like, I'm not like overpowering them too early or anything like that. So I use it as a basic guide, but I do just kind of tell them at the end of the session if they've leveled up.
Yeah, I don't think anybody uses experience points anymore. It's almost done. Also, too, because like I feel like a lot of people, not everybody, but a lot of people play a more narrative game nowadays, that XP becomes kind of archaic in the sense that, like you said, we role played for 2 sessions. Well, that means you didn't earn any XP, right?
Right. Other
than maybe some story rewards, which isn't that much compared to what you would get if you're doing 6 to 8 encounters you're supposed to do, between long rests or whatever. So it just doesn't make a lot of sense. Well, right, Joe says he still uses XP. You're the only person, buddy.
Joe, you're the one player still using it. No, but I think, there's also that thing, like, you don't want to level up to level 20 after you've beat a band of goblins, right? You want to do it after the epic dragon fight. So I think from a narrative storytelling aspect, it just kind of makes more sense.
So yeah. Also, Cyber Slayer 909 wants you to know. They said hi.
Oh, hello, Cyber. Yeah, he's.
But I mean, in all fairness, it doesn't matter how you guys do it in your game. Whatever works for your table. We went away from it for a different reason. We went away from it because we were like our group's older, so we all have families and jobs and all kinds of, all the responsibilities that go with it. So it's like, this night Mark can't make it, or that might, this night Steve can't make it, or whatever. There's going to be nights where people can't make it. And then at that point, XP just feels punitive.
Right.
So I'm like, I'm not going to penalize my friends because life got in the way. They couldn't get a sitter. They got called into work, whatever. So it was just easier to just keep everyone the same level.
Well, yeah, no, we experienced that in some of the later like episode 6 and 7, the party like split up and did one half of them did like this huge combat encounter where I'm sure they got like tons of XP, and then the other half did this like great social encounter that really advanced the plot. But then I leveled everybody up at the end of that session because it was a big one, but it's like should half the party be a higher level because they chose this path when both paths were both equally interesting.
Yeah. So Jacob wants to know, is it true Ranger is your favorite class?
So Jacob, that is the Jacob that introduced me to the game. He is in our he is in our table, and um I very much dislike Ranger. I think I I have seen. Okay, let me just say this. There have been 3 players that have played Ranger at my table, and with the exception of Sage, who is no longer playing at the table because he's on the tech side, those are the only 3 tables or the only 3 players that have not stuck around in my campaign. And so I think
Ranger's a group killer.
yeah, it's a group killer. Yeah, I mean, I think it's like you feel, especially because like Beastmaster is like, the famously not balanced class or subclass.
Yeah.
But I think that's like the whole draw of Ranger is like, oh, I want to play with this pet. And
Yes.
so like if you want to play something a different subclass, like just play a ranged fighter. We have an arcane archer fighter in our current campaign. So I personally don't really love Ranger and have a kind of negative experience with it. But I mean, to each their own. If you love Ranger, you love Ranger.
Ranger's tough. Ranger, because it focuses on the exploration pillar, and it just seems, and that pillar gets glossed over the most. So
yeah, well, I think I agree, and I think that pillar, like, I think you want everyone to be involved with exploration, and so you make exploration accessible to everyone, and then the Ranger's abilities kind of like go to nothing.
Yeah.
And so it could be a DM style that makes Rangers feel insignificant, but
So Cyber Slayer wants to know what you like about Warlock.
Oh, I love like I said, I'm a role play guy, and I love the RP and narrative aspect of having a patron who you can interact with. I think that's great. I mean, my second favorite class is cleric for the exact same reason. I think it's just such a great like mechanic that also turns into just such a great plot hook. And as a DM, I just really appreciate having that patron who I can turn to and make a huge event happen to them, or like they have this, they give the character this really strong motivation. And the same with cleric.
Did your patron come up a lot in your game?
Yes. Yeah, my patron actually, so I think Jacob said earlier in the chat, F in the chat for Shrody. My patron actually was plotting for the end of the world, and the campaign climaxed with me being sacrificed on behalf of my patron to potentially end the world, and it did. And Shrody was killed in that encounter, and we played a few sessions in the apocalypse trying to reverse that. But yeah, so my patron was actually a huge, I guess one of the main story hooks of that campaign, and I really appreciated that as a player too, is having such a concrete connection to the plot. I think that's really important.
Worst boss ever. And let me tell you, I've worked for some really cruddy people in my time. So Ted says the best Ranger is the Rogue Scout.
Yes, exactly.
So what do you think it is about? Is it about DMing that really appeals to you?
Well, I think there's, I've dabbled in writing, and obviously as a theater actor, just kind of storytelling my whole life. And I think it's such a unique and personal avenue of, it's a different way of telling stories directly to just a very small group of people. And I think it's really awesome. I think, I've tried writing. I've tried writing poems. I've tried writing stories, and it's like, can I connect to my audience? I don't know. Maybe, maybe I'll find out down the line that somebody read it and really liked it. But DMing, it's like, I crafted this story. I crafted this world. I crafted these enemies and this plot, and I can see it on my players' faces, that they are loving it and they're reacting to it. And I think that's just such a unique experience that is very hard to experience anywhere else, you know?
Yeah, I have to agree. I feel like it's a great creative outlet. Especially I want to say it's a great creative outlet, and I'm speaking from personal experience. If you have no talent, right? So maybe you can't perform, you can't sing, you can't play instruments, but like I feel like everybody can tell stories, right?
Right.
And you don't have to be a great technical writer. So like it's just like the DM is a sweet spot where I feel like it's super accessible to everybody, and the bar for entry is really low. It's kind of like just getting in there and doing it. So,
No, I completely agree. I think it's definitely one of the more accessible mediums of telling stories, and I think that's great. And it's like so much fun. Writing is a process,
yeah,
and it's a lot of like labor, but DMing is just like pure joy. I mean, it's work, but it's fun the entire time.
and like learning an instrument, you have to suck at it before you can make like beautiful sounds come out of this thing.
Right.
At least with DMing, you can have fun doing it for a while, even if you're not doing it particularly great.
Exactly.
So, do you have any special Halloween D&D coming up?
Yeah, we're actually doing a live one shot on Friday, so the day before Halloween, and we did a contest where the some of our fans submitted characters, and so the players are playing some of those characters for the Halloween one shot, and we uh, we also had this really cool idea that Sage is going to be working with the chat, and they're going to decide. Oh, well, my friend Kylie is DMing that one, so I'm a player in that, and Sage is going to look at the live chat, and he's going to put some like questions up, like what should the party encounter next, and then give a few choices, and then the live chat will like influence the game.
Yeah.
So we're experimenting with stuff like that. But yeah. So yes, short answer, yes, we're doing a Halloween one shot on Friday.
Yeah. We did something so similar. We were playing a Marvel Phase Rip game. So that's a RPG from the 80s. It's been dead about 30 years now. Uh, but we ran one on our channel, and the GM for that, Professor Bill from Comic Book University on YouTube, was the judge, and he did a lot of that with the interaction from the chat, and then allowed them to actually get into the game. Although the way you guys are doing it is better because he would talk and there's a delay, so it takes a while for the chat to jump in. You need a separate person that's just handling chat and it asks in chat because there's real time there.
Right.
So Joe wants to know, what do you think about dragons? He usually asks what's your favorite dragon too, so I'll just add.
Just to the game. I think they're great. I think it's interesting that you bring this up. But I think it's really interesting for me, and you might find this, if you watch our games. But I love the tropes of D&D and like the most iconic monsters, because unlike people that like yourself that have been playing for forever, my table hasn't experienced those tropes because we are new, and I think a lot of new players really avoid tropes for some reason. Like, they're not tropes if you've never played them, right? But like my first adventure, like we didn't start in a tavern. We fought these like really obscure monsters because I felt like we need to give something interesting to my players. But now I'm like really embracing the whole trope thing, because like my players have never gone into a mind flayer colony. They haven't I mean, they fought maybe like 2 dragons, but it's not like this like repetitive thing over and over. So I'm really embracing tropes now. Like now that I've done my research, like I love gelatinous cubes and mind flayers and dragons. So I think dragons are some of the best, because they're such a staple of the game, and I think for young players, they haven't experienced that, and it's not a trope if you haven't played with it to a repetitive end.
Not only that, I would add tropes are tropes for a reason, right?
Right.
So there's something there. And sometimes it's just fun to go through it. It's like a rite of passage, right? Starting in a tavern, encountering your dragon, saving the prince or princess, whatever the trope is, it's just, it's a rite of passage, and just because it's tropey and everyone knows what's going on doesn't mean it's not going to be fun.
No, 100%.
So,
I think some of the tropey aspects can just, I mean, like you said, they're tropes for a reason. I think they're some of the best tried and true, storytelling mediums. Starting in a tavern is such a great way to introduce the characters and such an easy plot hook right there in the tavern. And then you put your own little twist on it, like episode 1. um there's a play happening in the tavern in episode 1, and a little bit of spoilers, the play goes wrong, and they're one of the actors who is portraying a zombie is actually a zombie. So that's like how our episode 1
yeah,
starts,
oops.
and it's in a tavern. But it's like a little spin on that with a different trope, plus the little theater tie-in. And I think they're great. I think DMs should use them as much as they can, not to the point of exhaustion, but I think they're great for storytelling.
Do you have a favorite reoccurring NPC?
In my campaign right now, since it's set in a completely new world, there are just a few. They've kind of like traveled away from the city, so they're just starting to meet some people. But already my players really latched onto these two halflings, Dollop and Bowie. That they're I'm so sorry, I completely forgot. Yes, the whole fan base has an entire favorite NPC that they love. But my players really like Dollop and Bowie. They're two halflings that were in a shop together, and they're just kind of quirky, said something funny, and they love it. But the whole chat right now is mentioning the one NPC, whose name is Leo, and not a recurring NPC. Actually, only happens in the first episode. At least not recurring up to this point, although there has been a lot of talk about
Was Leo
getting
the
him back.
zombie?
Leo was not the zombie, actually. Leo was not an NPC that I had planned, but it was an NPC that my player, Santiago, he plays a half-orc named Blomf, who has like a 6 intelligence. He not an NPC I had planned, but Leo had like helped him like open the door.
Mhm.
And Blomf's whole time in the first episode is thinking everyone is Leo and going to Leo for help. It's just a random name I pulled out of a hat, but it turned into this really funny thing that I didn't do at all. One of my players made this really delightful moment, and now the whole fan base, as you can see in the chat, loves Leo. And some of them have speculated that he is the BBEG of my campaign. But yes, so he was not particularly interesting, but one of my players took a lovely spin on him and made him a fan favorite.
Well, I mean, that's so D&D anyway, right?
Right.
Like the thing you lovingly craft, your players will ignore, but that thing you just as a throwaway comment is the thing that gets latched onto.
Right. It's
and
like
they won't let go of it.
You try to put hooks in front of them and tell them what to latch onto, but then they go and do their own thing entirely, and you just kind of have to roll with it.
Yes, that's what being a dungeon master truly is all about. You say like you do a lot of preparation and haven't done a lot of improv, but I bet you've done way more than you think, and you're going to at some point. At some point, they're just going to do something, and you're going to be like, oh, I can either figure out how to get them back onto my story, or we can roll with this. And the moment you decide to roll with this, you're improving.
Exactly. I had planned in I think it's session 3, they decided they would leave the town that they started in, and I gave them a map, and they did not go where I thought they were going to go, or they skipped a town entirely that was on the way. They were like, we don't need to stop there. And I was like, okay, great. And I threw out those 4 pages, and can reuse, some of that for later. But yeah, you just kind of got to adapt.
Yeah. I mean, that's what being a GM is all about. And I think what happens as you GM more, you figure out what kind of things you need to work on to make your sessions flow. And for me, like it moved away from specific encounters per se to more like sandboxy things where it's like it doesn't like stupid things like just a list of NPC names, like you said, having their motivations and some characteristics. Like sometimes that is way more valuable than planning out the next 20 encounters. But
Right.
because you're probably going to use that over and over again, and you may or may not use those encounters depending on what your players decide to do.
No, 100%.
So yeah, so and also too, I think like when people are like, "Well, I'm an improv GM, I really don't do prep." I think that sometimes we get accused of being lazy, but what it is we just spend like more time thinking about the game and things that can happen than writing about like these very specific scenarios that we're not sure if that'll happen or not. I mean, in my
For
opinion,
sure.
anyway, that's how
No, for
how
sure.
I've kind of gone in that direction. So it's like now I'll write down a few sentences on a piece of paper and be like, all right, it looks like about enough, and maybe have an encounter. If things get boring, make something
Right.
attack or blow up or something.
No, definitely.
So yeah. So what's one of your favorite moments in gaming so far for you?
Well, again, I love it when players take something, I can write out a session as much as I want, but I don't really know, like it's just words on a paper until they play it. So I really love when players take something, even however small it is that I've written, and just make it something completely unique and totally new. Like the Leo moment. I loved that. I think you know that's a perfect example of my players taking something that I had no intention of being any part of the plot or any part of the game, and just having fun with it, and loving the game and getting into those characters by finding something to love. So yeah, I think I think the Leo moment was um a fantastic moment, but I also love seeing those like I think it's really rewarding as a DM when you can really see your players care about the game and care about the world you've built and care about the characters that they have created. And so there's this one moment in the show, and I won't spoil it because it's later on. But Blomf, who is usually the comedic relief, and Blitz, one of the other characters in the show, have this really interesting tension and conflict. And it's not like we disagree and they start a fight and roll initiative. It's like they disagree but like still love each other, and there's this really weird tension that's like so unique, and the role playing is just fantastic, and they're both fantastic actors, and they really get into the role. And so I loved seeing that moment between the two of them where they disagree, and they can get over it, but you can feel the tension in those characters. And it's just like those moments when the game like comes to life and you feel for these characters, and you almost want to like break down into tears, because of how unique this story is and how much you care about it.
Tension and conflict are the things that are kind of they're the grease that keeps the machine going and keeps it
Yeah.
interesting for sure. And I think people sometimes think that has to come from combat or violence in D&D, but not necessarily. So you
Right.
mentioned the half orc with a 6 intelligence. Do you guys roll your stats?
So we do not roll our stats. Although we did for a while, and I actually I got a little bit of I got a little bit of backlash when I said for this campaign that we would buy, I mean, friendly backlash, but my players are awesome, but that we were going to use point buy is what I said we were going to use. Well, we used to roll in the first campaign. We had, when I said we bought a rule book and stuff, we had very limited knowledge of what the rules were. And so we rolled 60 20s and used those as our stats. And so there was a vast disparity in power level. Some people didn't roll higher than like a 14. Some people had like 20, 20, 18. And we were like, that won't matter. It's just numbers. It mattered a little bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, we all still, that was just a learning curve. And then some of them would, I would like heighten them throughout as they were like vastly underpowered. And then we got to the point, the second campaign, we rolled 46, dropped the lowest, which is like the standard. And I still felt like Schrody rolled higher than average, but I still felt like there was a big disparity in power level when you roll 46. And I was like, that's a little weird. And so that's when I like started thinking it was a little weird. And then I had my players for this campaign that we're streaming. I had them roll stats. And then I kind of went back on my decision when I saw everyone had rolled stats. And I said, wow, this is vastly like different. Like some players rolled, it could be the luck of the dice, but some players rolled, 17, 16, 16, and then plus the racial bonuses. And then a couple players rolled like, nothing higher than a 14 or a 12. And then it's like, okay, I can have the low players re-roll their stats and then re-roll them again and again and again. And then everything gets boosted up. And I was like, I don't know. I don't know if I want to do that. And so I went back and I said, okay, let's do point buy instead. And, the players that had rolled higher were, a little upset about that because, that I kind of nerfed their stats.
Yeah.
But I felt like it was a good decision in the end. I think everyone was equal. And I think there's a few key points to why I like point buy. We have a fighter and a rogue in the party, and they get multiple ability score improvements that other classes don't get. And those don't really matter if everyone has 20s in all their stats, right? And so like, yeah, you can take an extra feat, but like there's only so many feats that are viable for a character and really heighten your power. But the point of like why fighter is not like significantly worse than wizard is because they get those ability score improvements. They have overall better stats while the wizard gets spells like wish, and so I felt like that was an important distinction for those characters. But also just in general, I feel like if players have high stats, if they have a 20 coming out of the gate or a 20 at level 4, then you kind of have to boost your monsters to like meet that. And, I feel like that's, I don't know. I kind of prefer lower level play, and it's more rewarding when you get those ability score improvements and get to that 20, and it feels satisfying. So that's why we use point buy.
That makes sense. So how did what is his name? Blumph. How did he get a 6 intelligence? Or was that one of the games where you guys did roll?
I'm actually not sure if he has a 6 or an 8, but if he has a 6, I think that was, he just said he wanted to have as low as intelligence as possible, and 8 is the lowest in point buy. But I might have given him an exception and just been like, you can take a 6, you don't get a plus anywhere else, but for RP, sure, you can take a minus. That's fine.
Blumph is OP. You gave him that extra negative.
Yeah.
That was actually why I asked, because I was like 6. Can't really get a 6 unless you roll.
Yeah.
There's definitely games where we have rolled, and I've definitely had some low stats like that. I personally like point buy and the standard array just because I'm generally terrible at rolling dice. And the last session or the last game that Ted's running, I'm actually still playing that character. We were given the option of either rolling or taking the standard or point buy. I think we were just going to do the standard or point buy, and then one of our players, Sophie, she had been around for a long time and playing the game for a long time, and she wanted to roll. So I was like, well, if you're going to roll, I guess I'll roll too. There's peer pressure. And then and then one of the other players, I believe, rolled as well. And I actually rolled the best stats I think I've ever rolled.
Really?
And so that character came out pretty well for it. But generally, I am not very good at rolling dice, so I prefer the standard array or point buy. I like point buy too because you can get rid of the dump stat. And
right,
I know people are like, well, the flaw makes the character more interesting. I'm like, yeah, it would be, but everyone has the same flaw somewheres, right? So it's less interesting to me. So sometimes, especially like if we do like an unoptimal build, I end up usually with like, I don't have super high stats, but you don't end up having any dump stats either. So, we're in a game where everybody has a dump stat. Now the character without the dump stat is the more interesting character, in my opinion,
Right.
because it's just not the same.
No, yeah, I think Point Buy adds, a little bit of customization that, you usually get from rolling. So, players can make their characters to some extent how they want.
And there's like absolutely no point in ever having a odd stat. So
Right.
yeah, you might as well just wait till you get your first ASI and bump by 2.
Yeah.
Uh, I don't know. So that's the optimizer in me anyway.
Right.
The odd stats hurt my brain now. So what is the current storyline you guys are working on now?
So, the story as I I guess as broadly as possible, as in broad strokes. Yeah, they started in this tavern, the Dueling Trunks Tavern, which was like a tree that was kind of split in the middle, and the tavern sits up there. They started during this intense thunderstorm, and they're all like swept into the tavern. For whatever reason, they're in the town. Some of them are just passing through. Some of them doing a little bit of work, and they came into this strange occurrence, which is a zombie is for some reason this zombified actor is in the play, and so it was a little bit of a mystery in like session 1 and 2, and I won't spoil like what it ended up being, but so there's a little bit of mystery there, and they kind of found out where that zombie came from and like what that was about. But then there's this other part where like it's still an unsolved mystery, as like, okay, what's happening big picture? These things that cause the zombie to happen are acting kind of weird. And so that's kind of like just like what spurred them into it. And then right now they have all moved to one of the bigger cities, and they're exploring some personal plot points and trying to get to the bottom of this kind of bigger mystery. But it's kind of it's a little slow paced in the fact that like there's no clear like BBEG or anything that's been like introduced right off the bat. I think that was an important thing that I wanted to introduce, was like, whether or not I've introduced the BBEG. I could not say, but I didn't want to give them right off the bat is you have to do this, you have to defeat this person. I wanted it to be like this is the world, this is the state of the world, you guys are adventurers now, you've come together, and then kind of fall into more elements of seeing the world in disarray almost, and realizing, oh, we have to solve this, then who's behind this, right? And so I think that's kind of a more interesting approach. I never really liked the whole you meet this bad guy, he it kills your family, go fight him. Like I think it's more interesting to have a broad effect and then bring it narrow. So that's kind of the general plot line. And again, we haven't gotten very far with it.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes there's this desire to just run this big epic game right from the beginning, right? Like we're gonna tell the Fellowship story, right? And rarely do they work out really well. I've learned that it's better. I like to start small and just build my way out. And you know what? If it ends up being like this big epic story, it'll grow into that because it was meant to. If not, it won't. And actually, both the campaigns that me and Ted ran to level 20 for 5e kind of did that, right? So like, it wasn't planned. It's just certain things kept reoccurring, and the players start linking them together. So as the GM, we're like, sure, why not? We'll go with it. That's what they seem to want to do, and it makes it really easy. So Cyber Slayer 909 wants to know how Nerdarchy and UniversiD&D came together. It's actually not that exciting of a story, but
not some like huge origin story.
Yeah.
But Sage and I sent an email and asked, we, or at least I have been, following their stuff and watching Nerdarchy for my D&D info, because I have not been playing for years and they have, and so there's been a lot of insight there, and so we reached out and said, hey, would you be willing to come chat with us? And they were, the nicest people on earth and said, of course. And now I'm here.
We're definitely people, and we are on Earth. Can verify that for sure. You know what? We're always up to talk D&D. The hardest part about that is just syncing schedules sometimes, but fortunately mine's flexible and Ted's is flexible. And I was like, hey Ted, you want to do this thing on Sunday and talk about D&D with these guys? He's like, sure. Who are they? So, and we did. It was cool, and these guys were cool to talk with, and we had a nice conversation, which you can go check out over on the channel, and because you guys are doing other stuff over there too, not just gameplays right now.
Right. So while we're away, we're doing and in the foreseeable future, we're doing some short form content that like everyone can enjoy, have a little bit of snippets of. Just kind of like everyone's doing their like own individual things. I'm doing a little like some like DM tips, some like really beginner DM tips, like what is this game? Why do we play it? How do we play it? Things like that. And then some of our other players are doing some really interesting stuff, and some stuff that's specifically D&D, and some stuff that's like more like, oh, this is nerdy and you guys would like this. So so we're trying to expand our content past just a 4-hour session series, because that can be understandably very, very daunting. And we've been trying different ways to like break it up. Some of our sessions are shorter, 2 to 3 hours, and then some of them are broken up into 2 parts, which is more digestible for whatever reason.
That's funny. Cyber Slayer says Blake is busy getting hit by D&D books. Yeah, I was going to mention this guy really can take a D&D book to D&D book to the face. So
yes, that's in the What is D&D video. There's an awesome intro that we filmed where Sage throws the Dungeon Master's Guide at my face, full velocity. It was a one take kind of thing.
Yeah. I'm sure he's like, I've been wanting to do this for years.
I know, right?
You got to suffer for your art. You know what they say?
Yeah, you really do.
Yeah, that was the first video I watched from you guys, and I thought it was great. And then I was like, wow, he just got hit in the head with a book. So yeah, has anyone looped that and just sent it to you yet?
I hope so. I hope I get spammed with emails of just
that should be should be a GIF. Yeah.
Yeah. Just me being hit in the head. Yeah.
I don't know if it's pretentious or not if you GIF yourself, but you should definitely GIF yourself.
Yeah, I don't know. Is that like acceptable? Make yourself a GIF?
I don't know. You make a troll account, GIF yourself, and then because the forces are good. They're angry about the ranger,
understandably.
But actually, I've had a lot of fun playing the ranger. I've played quite a few ranger characters, and I think most of them were beastmasters, which is arguably the worst ranger. But
well, I think fun. I think I'm a bit hypocritical in the whole ranger argument, because like one of my big things is emphasizing role play over mechanics. Like my player who plays Blomf took a 6 intelligence because he's like, look, I want that to be part of my character. I don't care if I get, that extra -1 to intelligence saves and intelligence rolls. Like I want, I don't need a boost because of that. I want that to be part of my character. And I think that's great. I think players should build, not optimized build if that's what's right for their character's role play. And, so if you really want to play a ranger, you don't have to be, mechanically, as necessarily as strong as the other ones, as the other players.
Also,
and so I'm kind of hypocritical in that regard.
If you're playing a narrative game, it actually doesn't even matter.
Right. Exactly.
like any of the things that are kind of like the weak points to the ranger, they're not even going to come up. Matter of fact, the weakest ranger, the Beastmaster, actually has an asset in the beast because it actually lends to role playing and RP and social interactions, because you have this instant talking piece, this instant conversation piece, which is the
exactly.
beast.
And I think when it boils down to it, I think that is, what the game is about, is having these diverse characters. And so a ranger can really definitely have their place in the party. So I kind of, I joke about hating it. If someone wanted to play Ranger at my table, I wouldn't say absolutely no. I would
Plus,
say
they're
let's
leaving
talk
your
about it.
table soon anyway, so it doesn't matter.
Right, exactly.
So they keep asking about this town hall thing.
Those are my players. So in my first campaign, this is like session 3, maybe. Very early in my Dungeon Master career, very early in their player career, but they were already getting a little antsy, a little, the plot, the main narrative maybe wasn't enough for them. I mean, and that comes when you're not 100% into like these characters. You kind of just built them on a one-off before you really knew the rules, and so I get that. So we had, and I don't like to use kind of the buzzword, but we had a couple murder hobos in the party.
Yeah.
And so there was, I'm not 100% sure why they did it, and I don't think there was actually any reason behind it. But a couple of my players stormed the town hall in this town, and I think they just said like, we want to talk to the leader of this town, and so they stormed the town hall, and they started just like hurting everyone in there. And for absolutely no reason. They rolled initiative with these tons of just townsfolk in there for just business. And all the guards showed up, all the town's guard. And I was being very lenient. I was like, these are first time players. That's okay. I'm a first time DM. I was very lenient. And the town's guard, held them at bay. And they said, we'll let you walk out. No other additional damage done to this town hall. And they did. They walked out with their hands over their head, and until one of them casted fireball in the whole center room as they were walking out, and basically burned the whole place to the ground.
So they're the villains.
So they're the villains of that campaign.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was quite a, it was a learning point as a DM, but it was a hilarious story. That was Sage. That was when Sage played. That was kind of his play style.
That is why Sage is no longer a player.
Yes, exactly. So that was, kind of, it was kind of soul crushing in the moment, because I was like, where do we go from here? Like the whole plot is in this town and now you're 100% criminals. But it was also like, it's a hilarious story to look back on and to talk about. And so, you always have those kinds of stories.
That's when the paladins start showing up.
Exactly.
To exact vengeance for the town.
Yeah.
Well, what you have here is now you have an evil campaign. I'm fairly certain at that point, whatever your alignment was, you can just mark chaotic evil.
I believe I changed one of their alignments down from neutral to evil.
It's pure chaos. It happens. So we're a couple minutes past the hour. Any final thoughts before we head on out?
No, I just want to say thank you so much for having me. I think the D&D community is so great because people like me and my group that are kind of just starting out can access, and part of it is just you as a team, but have access to resources like you guys, and you're willing and able to chat with us about this game that we all share a passion for. And so I think it's a really uniquely personal and interconnected community, and I think that's great. So thank you so much for having me on.
Well, thanks for coming on. I appreciate it. And we appreciate you invited us to come on and be interviewed. And, we just enjoy interacting with the D&D community. It's a great community to be a part of. There is a link to the UniversiD&D YouTube channel in the description, as well as once this is not live anymore, it'll be on the pin post. So you guys, I highly recommend you go check it out. If for nothing else, go watch Blake get hit in the head with a book.
Exactly.
After that, you can stop watching if you want, but you got to see that at least. So until next time, stay nerdy.